Welcome back on Dynamo. Today I want to propose you a video about the building step by step of the model Lauka Vai, or you can choose eventually the version of the Vengorian Lord. It's up to you to decide which one you prefer. I decided to point on the Lauka Vai because I was minding about the change of the weapon to change the type of model because I liked more the size and the type of model that it was the Lauka Vai itself, because I want to use it as Lauka Vai itself or as a female Vengorian Lord. So I decided to use a building in that way. Anyway, you can choose at the end the way that you prefer about it. And now we can go to see how to do it. The first step is to cut from the sprue the parts that you need. We can start from the part where the model will use to be put on, so the part of the base itself that it's the shiny feature that you see the Lauka Vai being positioned on. So you cut off the model and then you need to polish the parts. I suggest you to do each time that you cut off some parts of the models that you need to immediately polish them so that you don't forget about doing this, because otherwise if you make the gluing and so on and after you paint or so on, you make has some problems to be able to reach the parts that you need to polish. So use a cutter to cut off the parts. Don't worry about the part of the knife toward you. The most important thing is that you pay attention about the force that you use to use the cutting. So you have to use this in the way that you can remove the parts of the model that has constructed, and then use some files so that you can polish everything, so that there is not anything about molding lines or so on that can ruin the aspect of the model when you go to paint too. So pay attention about such step. And then I tried the subassembly part so that I verify that I done everything that it was suitable for it, and see how they make a fit together. And then I glue them together so that I can, after that I glue them together, make another round of polishing so that I'm able to polish the parts that are glued together, so that there is not any more lines that could ruin the aspect of the model itself. Then I take the other part of the ruin, because it's composed of different parts, and I do the same that I done before. So I cut off from the sprue and then I polish them, because remember that you have always to polish them, and I assemble them together so that they are able to do such, because there are not other parts to do this. Remember to do this each step that you need so that you pay attention about the instructions. And then we go to see the left hind leg of the model. Here you have to pay attention about polishing everything, because here you have quite a little pieces that can be not good combining. Anyway, if you want to prevent everything, when you go to assembly the parts of such subassembling, you can think about using a bit of green stuff, milliput or liquid green stuff, so that you can make that every gap that can be generated it's polished, so there is not any gap that it can ruin the, I can say, scene of such leg. So pay attention about such step. And now the right hind leg. So here again, as we said before, you have to pay attention even more than before about the cutting off from the spruce of such part, because there are some parts that are a bit delicate, and when you go to assembly you have to pay attention about how you glue, because you can make that you can in the polishing part make that with the files and so on, you can reduce a lot the gaps that you've been created, but because the assembly part is quite delicate, I suggest you eventually, because there is a gap, to use eventually here for sure some a little amount of green stuff or similar, so that you can fill the gaps if they are too much. So pay attention each step. And then I cut off the first breast of the model because I want to remember that as two breasts. You can appreciate or not, you can modify in such a way or not, it's up to you. Still, I decided to cut off this because I need as a central part to create the volume around. And then there is the left wing. Here you have to pay attention when you remove it from the sprue because there are a lot of parts that are delicate and you can risk quite easily to break. So pay attention, eventually leave a bit more sprue and go to polish it more accurately later on because really it's quite problematic to repair the parts if you break when you remove these from the sprue, so pay attention. And when you go to polish, remember that you have the need to use it using eventually more steps but delicate one. Moreover, when you go on the skeletal part of the wing itself, because you need to do it step by step. Polish it paying attention and not be in a hurry, so that you can make little incisions on the parts that you need to cut off and step by step remove. So use files, use the cutter and so on, but not being too in a much hurry about this because it's really quite delicate, and even if it's a bit flexible, it's not so stable as it could seem. So pay a bit of attention, use your finger as a stabilizer so that you are able to remove the parts without any problem. And then when you go to glue them together, pay a bit of attention about the amount of glue, because if you use too much glue here, you risk that it's not so a good thing after that you can perceive, because you can create some residual that it's quite an aesthetic. Okay, if you put in the internal part, it's almost not seen, but you know. So pay a bit of attention about such steps and be a bit delicate about the wings. And the same I do for the right wing. So again, pay attention about remove such wing from the sprue and about polishing it, because again it's quite delicate and this even more than the previous one, so pay a bit of attention but simply redo it. And then I make the first subassembly, so gluing together the part of the chain feature that I created before with the left leg, so that I'm able to create the basic where to put the first breast on. And here you have to pay attention about how to combine so that it's in the right positioning. If you want to modify the position, you have to think before such step, because otherwise you'll have a bit of problems about. And after put together the first breast with the left leg, I glue together also the right leg. This it's helping to stabilize everything, because it makes a sort of triangle, so you have 2 points that are making the model more stable. And about this, remember that there is an important part, the gap that it's created, so you can use a bit of using the files and combining it with green stuff and so on to make that everything is solid, because this is the step that you have to pay attention about the basic central part that it will be make everything around. So use the parts and the things that you feel necessary to do this. And then I prepare the tail. Remember that it's 2 parts the tail. So remember that you have to cut off and polish it. Remember that it's not so delicate as the wings, but you have to pay a bit of attention about that. So take note about this. And then you glue them together. It's quite easy because they make a combination without any problems, and it's quite easy to make a site. Eventually you can wait that you combine everything else and then glue it at the end. Sincerely, I have not found anything worse about this, so I decided to make this and polish it directly so that it was perfect fine. It's quite easy, this step. And then I make the first fake subassembly, so that I use a bit of blue tack to see how I can combine the different parts that I prepared till now and see if they are okay, if there are some problems, and the point that I'm at when preparing such models. So you have to decide if it's okay for you and do other things, but it's also a time to decide if you want to monetize, if you want to prepare some other things, and so understand the next step that you want to approach to. And then I take off the fingers of the wings themselves because they are detached. About this, it's simply a step that you can decide when to go to do. And sincerely, I suggest you to make this a subassembly part so that you can assemble this and paint the wings together before to assemble the model all together. So about this, pay simply attention and refine, because the one about the right wing it's simple, so it's better to make a better effort. And then we go to do the last of the scenic feature that it remain. About this, you have simply to prepare to remove them. It's nothing problematic, but I suggest you a little trick about polishing these ruins themselves, because in this case, for example, I suggest you to make this little movement, make the cutter doing in a sort of V movement, so that you can cut the excess part of it, and then you can polish it as you want without any problem about. And next, the classic subassembly about such scenic feature itself. And so we can see the temporary assembly that I created, so to understand if everything is okay. And then I go to create again a new subassembly, so step by step I assemble and prepare more of the model. And in this case I prepare the central part, so using the back and the tail, gluing them together. So after that I tried and I seen that everything combined perfectly, I put them together. In this case I create so a pillar that it helps me to take a move about the model and so on, and understand better the success part, how I can treat them. So not worry too much, and if you decide that you want to build the model as it is, it's the step that you have to proceed to. And then there is the cloth piece that covers the bottom part of the basin, and it's up to you to decide if you want to glue it before or after painting. I decided to glue it before painting because I found it a better choice, but it's up to you to decide based on your ideas on how to paint such part of the model itself. And then I cut off the part of the armor, the common part in this case of the warrior part of this model, and the part of the left arm. In this case I decided to assemble at the beginning, but pay attention because it can be quite problematic, and if you want to monetize I suggest you to wait. But sincerely I was not interested about monetize the left arm, so I glued the parts together because I didn't need, but still I have to remove that left arm. And then I have the two mobile parts of the armor that are really thin and quite okay, small. Here I had to pay a bit of attention about removing and polish them, but to decide how effective position them, I decided to try with a bit of Patex before, because it was a bit problematic to find the correct position, so it was useless to glue them. Now I prefer to paint the model before and then glue the parts in the position that I decided, but still I wanted to try a bit and see how they were fit. And then I removed the right arm with the sword, the one about Lauka Vai, because I decided to try that one first, and the other part of the hand of the left hand. Here you have to pay attention. I decided to test the arm to see how I can make it combine, and I thought that it was a good idea to glue it before, but it was a really a bad idea to do this, because I had problems then to put the breast, and I found that it was problematic to magnetize. So pay attention about such step and not do the same. And then I glue anyway the part of the hand to complete the left hand. So about this, you see that I remove that right arm because I made a mistake about this. So pay attention before doing the same. And then I prepare the breast. In this case, I decided to use the female part, so the one about Lauka Vai, but you can decide to use the one about the Vengorian Lord. It's up to you to decide which one you want to assemble. Sincerely, I thought about monetizing this, but I found it really not a good thing. So it's better if you decide which type, male or female, you want to use, or if you want to create an androgynous one, because eventually you can use the male part and use the female head, or vice versa, use the female part and use the male parts. It's up to you to decide how you want to combine, but sincerely, to make more stable such models, I suggest you to make the decision before so that you can assemble everything. Here you can see that I still have to glue, but when you go to see the parts that I assembled about the shoulder pads, you see that I made a gluing that you've seen before, so pay attention. About the hand that you see in the left one, it's because I detached and reattached it in the way that it was better positioned. And about the shoulder pads, I suggest you to do this directly on the, I can say, on the arms themselves, because otherwise you have a bit of problem about making the glue together. They perfectly suit the arms, so it's not a problem in that way. Anyway, remember that they are composed of two parts, so you have simply to assemble them together. You can eventually choose to assemble them after you have painted the armor, but sincerely it's up to you. I simply decided to assemble anyway the shoulder pads together with the arm. And about this, remember that that arm will be detached, the one with the sword, because I want to make it magnetize, and it's better, I remember you, to make it before to do everything. So you first put the breast and then you make. And then you can see that I put together the collar that is the base on where to put the head itself of the model. So here you have simply to find the right position, but there is perfect. You make them combine without any problem. And then here we can see the subassembling part, so we can see that the model is really nice. And then we only miss the head, so I cut off the part of the female head because it's the one that I decided to use. And here you can see the different parts that I go to make a subassembly then. And here, so are the part that I've used, so all the parts that I've used for such model, but still I miss some parts that are the ones that are still on the sprue. So in the sprue are simply the rest of the parts, but some of these I decided to use because I want to make something that I can choose. So I decided to create the alternative arm, the one about the Vengorian Lord for the sword and so on. So I decided to cut off the shoulder pads and the sword itself from the sprue and make a subassembly about that part, because I wanted to use this as option, and I want also to use as an experiment to magnetize and so on, so that I was able to create something that it was quite useful to put then on the model. Here you simply have to follow, as you can see, the assembly. It's really quite easy to do, so not problem at all, and it's a way to prepare the steps for the next ones. As you can see, I forcibly removed the right arm from the model and I decided to go to magnetize. About the body itself, I decided to use a 3-for-2 magnet, so I create a whole equivalent one. About instead the arms, I decided to create a 2-for-2 mm one, so I decided to use a not symmetric magnetizing. So because 2-for-2 and 2-for-2 was not so good as magnet force, I decided to create a 3-for-2 and 2-for-2 magnet so that it was more solid. In this case, so it was quite good because the magnet force was enough to make the model quite nice to interchange from each version to the other one. And then I removed the parts that remain of the sprue, so the part about the Vengorian Lord except the sword that I used. And this I can use for other projects. Eventually the head you can change if you're interested, or you can simply use as base or something else, but are quite useful. And then I make the final test of subassembly. So I take a bit of blue tack and I put together all the different parts that I chosen and prepared. And here are the final result, and I really like it. So here I decide finally to glue the parts together after having painted the model itself, and I like the final effect. And here the painting. I decided to make a lot of different experimentation about painting such model because I wanted to have a lot of fun. So I made the skin of the part of the monster of this model, combining the greens with blue inks, so to have something quite interesting about. And about the armor, I wanted to combine and create something that I use metallic and purple ink. About the sword, a combination of green ink and purple ink. And about the sword, I made in the way that you can switch, so you can use the one about the Lauka and the one about the Vengorian Lord. And about the one about the Vengorian Lord being magnetized, you can change the positioning and having a nice effect as you like. So, from Dino Mode, it's everything. I invite you to put a like on this video, to subscribe to the channel, to ring the bell, and to comment this video if you are interested in something about this video or you want to suggest me some arguments for other videos. I hope to see you again to the next time.